There are roads the GPS doesn't warn you about, highways that remember every soul that's ever tried to leave them. And tonight, you're on one. The engine hums, the static whispers, and the road keeps going long after the world should have ended. Tonight, Dread Scribe writes, "Again, before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if there's a story you'd like me to cover next, I'd love to hear it too." The night I took the shortcut, the sky looked clean enough to trust. I'd been driving 18 hours straight, state to state, asphalt to asphalt, when my GPS suggested a quicker route. It wasn't on any of my maps, but the voice spoke with such calm authority that I believed it. The display showed a faint gray line veering off the interstate, like a ghost road waiting to be remembered. My fatigue agreed before my logic could protest. I turned the wheel, headlights slicing through the dark like a scalpel through black silk. The new road felt strange from the first mile. The pavement looked freshly laid, smooth as glass, yet oddly muted beneath the tires. No crunch of gravel, no resonance of rubber. Trees pressed in on both sides, tall and too symmetrical, as if nature had been digitally copied. My radio hissed softly, catching stray fragments of static that pulsed in rhythm with the white dashed lines. It felt less like I was driving and more like I was being drawn forward, the horizon pulling me in like a magnet buried under the earth. At first, I tried to rationalize. Roads get repaved, signals bounce. The mind invents patterns when it's tired, but the odometer betrayed me. The miles ticked up while the landmarks repeated. A rusted mailbox, a bent speed sign, a billboard for Fresh Peaches Exit 12. I passed that sign 3 times, but there was no Exit 12, no farm stand, only the same infinite stretch of night. The realization hit like a chill wind. I wasn't driving through the road. I was driving inside it. My truck's clock blinked 2:03 a.m., then 2:04, then 2:03 again. I felt my sense of time bend like warm plastic under a flame. In a desperate attempt to orient myself, I checked the GPS. The route line had coiled into itself, spinning endlessly, a digital snake eating its own tail. The screen's glow flickered, then the voice calmly repeated, "Continue straight." It was the tone people use when pretending everything is fine. The air grew denser, heavy with metallic scent, ozone and rain that never fell. Static deepened on the radio until it formed faint whispers, too patterned to be random, too mechanical to be human. I heard coordinates, a woman's voice reciting numbers with the cold precision of a scientist. I wrote them down on the dash with a pen that shook in my hand. My pulse synced with the static, thumping in uneven intervals, as though something unseen was tuning me like an instrument. I slowed the truck. The road behind me was gone, replaced by darkness so pure it looked painted. My headlights revealed nothing beyond 10 feet. The horizon ahead was a dull gray smear, flickering like a dying film reel. Somewhere in the distance, a faint neon glow blinked, a gas station sign, red and humming like a heartbeat. Relief washed over me, though I didn't know why. I pressed the accelerator. The truck roared back to life, tires humming like distant thunder. The sign grew larger. Open 24 hours. But the closer I got, the more the glow distorted, colors shifting, letters bending. The place looked familiar. Too familiar. My fuel gauge read half a tank. My clock still read 2:03, and as I pulled closer, I realized I had been to this gas station before. Not tonight, not ever. But somewhere inside a memory I was never supposed to revisit. The neon steadied like a lung relearning breath, rinsing the pumps and cracked concrete in red. I cut the engine. The night unspooled its small stitches, crickets sewing a seam, a transformer humming like a caged choir. Diesel and cold sugar hung together, carnival sweet and hospital clean. The storefront returned me twice in the glass, each reflection misaligned, as if reality had printed 2 drafts and forgotten which to keep. Déjà vu rose like heat of new asphalt. I had never stood here, and yet my bones behaved like regulars finding their favorite tile. Inside, fluorescence pressed a hard dental white onto tidy aisles. Glass Coke bottles, cassette tapes, road atlases shrink-wrapped from the year I learned to drive. A tiny TV exhaled snow. Beneath it, a radio whispered tide-like static that kept resolving into coordinates, then into a timestamp. 0203. My phone read 2.03. The truck clock read 2:03. Time balanced like a coin on its edge, refusing to decide whose floor to fall on. I reached for logic, frequency spillover, geomagnetic hotspots, hypnagogia, but doubt moved quicker. The way wind outruns perfume. There was no attendant, yet the register woke and displayed my name in blocky arcade fonts. My scalp tightened the way it does before lightning. Metaphors crowded closer because nothing else fit. Time pulling like warm taffy, memory looping like a Mobius strip of lanes. Then a photo on the tip jar stalled my breath. Me, younger, unsmiling, the truck cleaner, the same crooked cap that now shadowed my eyes. What story develops in a place that sells yesterday brand new? But what it didn't explain was why I felt expected. A motion sensor coughed the lights brighter. Down the snack aisle, every bag was sealed, every expiration date identical. 203, the number nailed through calm. I opened a fridge. Fog pressed my skin like a shy animal. Milk jugs wore a logo from a state that doesn't touch this one. When I shut the door, my reflection lagged by a beat, buffering like video on a weak signal. That hesitation, only a breath, became proof the room stood a half step outside me. A museum diorama arranged to resemble my night. At the counter, the receipt printer began to chatter. Paper uncoiled with patient malice, a pale snake. It printed my fuel level, my last oil change. The song welded in my head. The coordinates again. It printed a signature that wasn't mine but leaned the way mine leans when I'm impatient. I flipped the strip expecting a map. Letters darkened from residual heat. Don't go back the way you came. Command, warning, or bait? I faced the window. The road outside gleamed to lacquer. The horizon erased like chalk from a board. The TV popped. A face formed in the snow, my face older. Its mouth shaping words the speaker strangled. The drawer slid open and offered a ring of keys stamped with tiny latitude and longitude. I took them. The metal felt warm as a living palm. A back door clicked and swung on a corridor lined with red exit signs pointing both directions, a paradox in arrows. My heartbeat steadied in rebellion. I thought of hippocampal wayfinding cells, paths coded like constellations. If the maker is also the map, who is truly driving? The air thinned, metallic as rain on pennies. Lights trembled overhead in a Morse I couldn't read. 3 doors bore numbers, 2, then 0, then 3. A 4th had no number, only a handwritten label, home. The key fit. The lock turned. Beyond it breathed a sound like tires on wet asphalt, steady as pulse. I lifted my hand to the knob, and the radio used my father's voice to say my name the way you say a prayer you fear will be answered. The knob turned from the other side. It started somewhere along Highway 26, a stretch of blacktop so quiet it felt like driving through a memory. The mountains rose like sleeping giants on either side, their peaks veiled in mist that shimmered beneath the moonlight. I'd been hauling cargo for 14 hours, caffeine doing battle with exhaustion, when I noticed the headlights. 2 clean orbs of white, distant but steady, anchoring themselves in my rearview mirror. At first I was grateful for the company. Night driving can feel like steering through the void, and those lights reminded me that humanity hadn't disappeared. But as the miles unfolded, the lights never changed. Not closer, not farther, a patient shadow in perfect synchronization with my speed. I slowed, they slowed. I accelerated. They matched me exactly. I tried to wave them past, flashing my hazard lights, but the driver never moved. The space between us became a line drawn in invisible ink. Something sacred or sinister, I couldn't tell which. My mind reached for logic. Maybe they were cautious, maybe my taillights were dim, maybe this was coincidence. Yet as the road narrowed into serpentine curves, I could feel it, that watching. The human brain isn't built for isolation at high speed. Studies show our perception of distance warps after prolonged darkness exposure. Objects appear to breathe or shift when they're perfectly still. Maybe that's what was happening, I told myself. Optical trickery, fatigue, overthinking. But part of me, the primitive part that still fears the rustle in tall grass, didn't buy it. The headlights felt intentional. Their beam didn't wobble over the hills or fade against the mist. It was constant, like a machine that didn't need to blink. I turned on the radio, craving noise to drown the silence. The frequency caught only static at first, then a voice faintly murmuring through distortion. It wasn't music, but a broadcast. Monotone, clipped words repeating coordinates I didn't recognize. I twisted the knob. The voice vanished. When I looked up again, the headlights had vanished too. Relief hit like cool water after fever. I exhaled, letting my pulse settle, convincing myself the car had taken an exit. No exits, just curves, fog, and old trees leaning too close. And then at the next bend, the headlights reappeared, closer this time. I could see their reflection flare across my tailgate. A tremor of fear threaded through my chest. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to find rhythm in the hum of the tires. Maybe if I focused on the mechanics, I could keep panic from blooming. Heartbeat, breath, road, repeat. But curiosity is the predator that always returns to the scent. Why would someone follow this long? Why match my every move? My mind flipped through possibilities like cards, a bored driver, a prankster, a drunk. Yet none fit the precision. Even at hairpin turns, the lights mirrored my angle, like choreography rehearsed 1,000 times. Somewhere in that perfect symmetry, I felt the first fracture of reality. Because when the next curve opened to a straightaway, I caught something impossible in the mirror, my own truck's reflection. Headlights burning from behind, exactly in sync. I stared into the mirror, waiting for my mind to reject what it saw, but the reflection didn't flinch. My own rig followed behind me. Headlights identical, grille dent identical, even the faint scrape on the bumper I'd gotten 2 weeks ago. It wasn't possible, but there it was, breathing down my tail like a memory that refused to stay behind. The radio crackled again, no words this time, just a frequency hum that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. I pressed harder on the gas, the road a narrow artery through blackness, mountains hunched like dark witnesses on either side. The second truck, my other self, matched my acceleration perfectly. No lag, no deviation, just mechanical mimicry. Every blink of my taillights was echoed a fraction of a second later, like an echo learning to predict its source. I tried to rationalize the scene, atmospheric reflections, mirages caused by the altitude. But none of it explained why I could see my own license plate, why the headlights moved with intention. I flicked my high beams. The glare bounced back, white-hot and blinding, as though I had turned the mirror inward and was staring straight into my own eyes. I veered toward the shoulder, gravel spitting beneath my tires. The mountain air smelled like wet stone and ozone, electric and ancient. I rolled down my window and listened. Nothing. Not wind, not crickets, not the world. Just that endless hum, a low vibration that wasn't sound but pressure. I thought of auditory standing waves, how two identical tones can cancel out all movement. Was I caught inside that kind of stillness? A resonance loop of myself? I killed the headlights and waited in the dark. The reflection should have vanished. But instead, those twin beams remained, suspended in the void like a pair of eyes studying me through glass. The shape behind them wavered. No longer crisp metal, but something breathing, its contours twitching as though reality couldn't decide what version of me to render. I turned the ignition. Nothing. The key clicked against dead air. When the headlights blinked off, the darkness collapsed in. For a moment, it felt like the entire mountain inhaled. Then silence. Heavy, final, absolute. I climbed out, flashlight trembling in my hand, beam slicing the fog. The road behind was empty. No truck, no tire marks, just unbroken asphalt gleaming under the moonlight. My reflection had gone, or maybe I had. I walked ahead on foot, driven by the kind of curiosity that ruins a man. A mile later, I found skid marks, mine, leading straight into a ravine that dropped 50 feet into black water. My license plate glimmered at the edge, twisted, half buried in moss. I staggered backward, heart slamming, mind splitting between two possible truths. Either someone else was driving my past, or I was already the echo chasing myself through time. The radio inside my truck buzzed faintly again, speaker clicking alive. My own voice came through it, hoarse, tired, unmistakable, whispering, "You're still on the road? Keep driving." And when I looked back toward the highway, the headlights had returned, waiting for me, patient and eternal, as if I was destined to follow myself forever. By dawn, rescuers found tire debris at the ravine, but no body. They said the crash had happened 2 nights earlier. Yet my dashcam footage kept recording. The same loop, the same road, the same headlights in the rear view. There's a stretch of road in northern Idaho that locals don't talk about after dark. They call it Mile Stretch 19. though no one agrees where it starts or ends. I was hired by the State Transportation Department to survey it, update the GPS data, mark new signs, record readings for road repair. Simple work, or it should have been. But even on the first night, I noticed something wrong. The air around that place felt heavier, as if gravity leaned a little harder. My compass needle twitched. The sky above the trees didn't match the horizon line on my map. Mile markers are supposed to be constants, little milestones of mathematical order. But when I drove past marker 71, the next should have been 72. Instead, it read 90. My headlights painted it in pale silver, numbers glinting like wet paint. I stopped, walked back to check, and the metal was cold, slick with condensation despite the dry air. I logged it, chalked it up to vandalism, and drove on. 10 minutes later, another marker appeared. 13, then 71 again. My odometer disagreed. The GPS lagged behind, its arrow jerking across the screen like a trapped insect. It's funny how quickly a person shifts from certainty to doubt. At first I told myself it was fatigue, misperception, maybe a data glitch from solar interference. The scientist in me wanted structure, but the longer I stayed, the more I felt watched, not by eyes, but by measurement itself. It was as though reality was recalibrating while I wasn't looking. My rearview mirror caught flickers of the last marker I'd passed, glowing faintly even after I'd driven miles beyond it. Each time I blinked, the numbers shifted. I tried to mark my location manually, planting a survey flag near marker 13. When I looked back 5 minutes later, it was gone, or rather the entire section of road had rearranged itself. The mile markers had moved, not vandalized, not replaced. Moved. I could trace the faint drag marks in the soil where the posts had shifted, like something beneath the asphalt had dragged them closer together. I checked the ground with a magnetometer. The reading spiked, then flatlined. The rational part of me cataloged every possibility: tectonic slip, magnetic flux, data interference. But deep down, I knew none of that explained the way my GPS clock kept freezing at the exact same time. 3:11 a.m. Every hour, the same timestamp. It was as though time itself refused to move forward. The radio inside my truck picked up distant frequencies, Morse-like clicks repeating sequences of numbers, the same mile markers I was seeing. I tried to ignore it. I couldn't. When I finally turned to head back, I saw something that rooted me to the spot. At marker 90, the one that shouldn't exist, the ground had cracked open slightly. A glint of chrome reflected in the light. I knelt down, brushed away the dirt, and froze. It wasn't a car part. It was an entire license plate, bent but intact. My license plate clutched in my hands, the cold metal pressing its story into my skin. My truck sat 20 feet away, idling like a restless animal, its own license plate still attached and gleaming in my headlights. 2 identical tags, one on the bumper, one in my grip. My brain felt like a short-circuiting circuit board, sparks of reason trying to find ground. A prank? A duplicate? Or had something rewritten the rules of space while I wasn't watching? The forest around me seemed to inhale, trees groaning as if the night itself was stretching. I tossed the plate into the bed and checked my instruments again. The magnetometer needle spun in frantic circles, then froze, pointing straight down, as if the disturbance wasn't in the air but beneath my feet. I followed the pull to the ditch beside marker 90. The soil there was loose, disturbed recently. I began to dig, boots sinking into the cold mud. Every few inches I hit fragments, glass, a tire shard, something like shattered metal ribs. The air grew heavy with the scent of burnt oil and wet iron. Then my shovel struck steel. It was a car door, half buried, the same color as my truck, the same make, same dents. My pulse stumbled. I cleared more dirt and saw the company logo still printed on the side. My name, stenciled letters from my own work vehicle, stared back at me. The paint was faded, eaten by time, as though it had been underground for years. Yet I had driven this same truck here less than an hour ago. The rational part of my mind screamed to retreat, to log the anomaly and leave. But some gravitational curiosity pulled harder. I opened the door. Inside was a skeleton slumped over the wheel, fingers fused to metal, its wrist wrapped in my watch. The same brand, same engraving. It was impossible. The corpse's jaw hung open as if caught mid-gasp, and through its cracked skull leaked faint blue light. the same hue that bled from the shifting mile markers along the road. I stumbled back, trying to breathe logic into madness. Could geomagnetic resonance create recursive hallucinations? Could high radiation fields induce memory mirroring? My scientist's brain hunted explanations while my instincts screamed something simpler. I was standing in the echo of myself. Maybe the markers weren't counting distance at all. Maybe they measured iterations. I fled toward my truck, heart pounding out a code I didn't understand. As I passed marker 13 again, its number flickered, briefly changing to 14, then to 71, then to 90. The sequence repeated like a heartbeat skipping beats. My GPS screen suddenly bloomed with red, displaying the word recording, though I hadn't touched it. The camera feed showed me still standing by the open grave, staring into the buried truck, unmoving. I slammed the door shut and floored the accelerator. The road unfolded endlessly ahead, but the mile markers continued to count down instead of up. 13, 12, 11. The digits glowed brighter, almost alive, pulsing in rhythm with the static from my radio. Somewhere behind me, metal scraped, like another engine waking up. I looked into my rearview mirror just long enough to see headlights in the distance. Not approaching, emerging. The shape behind them was unmistakable. Another truck, the same dents, the same silhouette. My truck. And inside it, someone gripping the wheel, face identical to mine, eyes glowing faintly blue. The mile markers weren't counting miles. They were counting versions, each one a failed attempt to escape the loop. And I had just become the next number. I first saw her on a night so quiet even my pulse sounded intrusive. The highway was empty, a silver vein through a sleeping world, when my headlights caught the shimmer of a reflective vest. She stood at the roadside near mile marker 42, one arm raised, palm open in the universal language of distress. As a paramedic, instinct overrode exhaustion. I slowed, heart sinking to the rhythmic flash of her vest. But something about the light was wrong. It didn't blink like standard reflective gear. It pulsed, slow, deliberate, almost biological, as if the light were breathing through her. The air outside was thick with the metallic scent of rain that hadn't yet arrived. My boots crunched gravel as I approached, the radio in my ambulance muttering faint static. She didn't move, didn't turn. When I got close enough, her face was pale and unlined, eyes wide open but unfocused, like someone watching a fire only they could see. Her lips moved without sound. I reached for her shoulder. It was cold, colder than the air. My flashlight beam jittered, scattering across her vest, and for a split second I saw a faint burn mark on the fabric, a melted patch shaped like a number. 19. I asked if she was hurt, but she only tilted her head slightly as though listening to something behind me. I turned. The road was empty. Yet the faint echo of sirens rippled through the distance, not present, not absent, a memory of emergency replaying itself. I'd heard of this kind of thing before. Trauma loops, residual energy, psychic recordings in places where adrenaline once burned too hot to fade. Science called it environmental imprinting. The dead, some said, don't haunt people, they haunt moments. I should have left. I knew the procedure. No victim, no pulse, no coordinates, no call. But curiosity is the paramedic's curse. We want to fix what isn't ours to mend. I waved my light again, asking her name, but she just pointed at the road ahead. Her arm moved with mechanical precision, the gesture flawless, rehearsed, like someone who had practiced it hundreds of times. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, radio flat. "He's still in there," she said. My body froze. "Who?" I asked. Her eyes flicked toward the embankment, where tall weeds swayed under the headlights' spill. I followed her gaze and saw the faint glint of chrome half hidden in the grass. The outline of a vehicle crushed inward, roof caved, windshield webbed with fractures. The ambulance headlights skimmed over a door decal, a faded emergency symbol. It was my own station's insignia. The crash looked old, rusted. I walked closer, hands trembling. My radio suddenly screamed. Not words, just a high-pitched alarm tone used to mark responder fatalities. It blared once, then silence. When I turned back, the woman was gone. No footprints, no reflection. Only the faint, residual shimmer of her vest still pulsing faintly in the darkness, like a heart trying to remember its rhythm. And then my radio crackled again, this time with a voice. my voice calling for help from inside the wreck. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My voice, or something using it, kept repeating the distress code through the static. Medic 19 requesting assistance. Vehicle down, driver trapped. It was the exact phrasing we use in collision protocol, the same sequence I'd trained a dozen rookies to memorize. But the frequency wasn't live. It was archived. The emergency channel timestamp on my radio blinked August 14th, 2016, the night I'd crashed my first rig. The night she died, I stumbled closer to the wreck. The metal was torn like a peeled fruit, exposing the interior to the wet night air. My flashlight flickered, catching fragments, a stethoscope, a deflated airbag, shards of broken glass reflecting the strobe of my own pulse. And then I saw her again, standing on the other side of the crumpled vehicle, vest still glowing. But this time her face was visible under the beam. It wasn't blank anymore. It was familiar. The cheekbones, the narrow chin, the scar beneath her left eye. It was Marla, my partner that night. She'd been my mentor, sharp, fearless, always the first to enter a wreck even when others hesitated. I remembered the last words she'd said before the crash. "We're not built to stop helping." She'd been thrown from the ambulance when it rolled. I'd been found half-conscious. They'd said she died instantly. Yet here she was, standing in the same uniform she'd worn that night. Her eyes two dim lanterns in the fog. The reflective vest pulsed brighter with every breath I took, as if responding to my heart rate. She didn't speak, just nodded toward the wreck. I forced myself to look inside, and there, slumped against the steering wheel, was someone in a uniform identical to mine. The face was partially obscured by blood and glass, but the details were unmistakable. It was me. Or something wearing my exhaustion, my fear, my mirrored expression of disbelief. I stepped back, the gravel shifting like dry bones under my boots. Logic fell apart. Was this temporal recursion? Quantum echo? A hallucinatory loop triggered by trauma recall? The scientist in me reached for data while the human part clung to denial, but the night had gone very still. The kind of still that happens before lightning strikes. Marla, or what was left of her, raised her hand, and in that motion, I understood. She wasn't asking for help. She was given it, a rescuer frozen in the act forever, trapped in the replay of her last call. The vest wasn't glowing. It was burning, fueled by the radiation of the moment that killed her. I reached toward her, fingertips brushing the light. It felt like static and sorrow. Her voice came again, but this time it was inside my head. "It's not over yet." The wreck vanished. The field went silent. My flashlight cut through empty air. I stood alone beside mile marker 42, the reflective shimmer fading into darkness. My radio went dead, then powered itself back on, displaying one message in the emergency feed. Incident repeating. Do not respond. I climbed back into my rig, trembling. The GPS recalibrated automatically, drawing a new route, a single gray line pointing back to where I'd just been. The road hummed beneath my tires, whispering in Morse I couldn't translate, half hoping to see her again, half praying I never do. Every time the vest catches my headlights, I slow down, not to rescue, but to remember the ones who never stopped trying. The fog rolled in like something alive, thick, intelligent, deliberate. It moved across the Utah plains with a strange rhythm, not drifting but advancing, swallowing the highway mile by mile. I was in the passenger seat of our old Jeep, map in hand, when the first sign appeared. Route 191, exit 12, ahead. My friend Ben grinned through the dim glow of the dashboard. "Shortcut," he said. "Shaves an hour off to Moab." The highway stretched empty, the kind of silence that feels too complete, as if sound itself had been deleted. I nodded, trusting the logic of the map, the steady hum of asphalt beneath us. But logic, I would soon learn, has its own expiry date on Route 191. We passed the sign again 20 minutes later. The same bent pole, the same missing bolt, even the same crow perched motionless on top. Ben laughed nervously, chalking it up to a road crew mistake. I wanted to believe him, but the GPS blinked, coordinates stuttering between numbers, and the screen froze, showing our position as a gray dot floating on blank white. No data, it read. I zoomed out. The map didn't exist anymore, just void. The fog thickened, pressing against the windshield like frosted glass. Every sound became muffled. Our voices, the tires, the engine's rhythm. Then, faintly through the static of the car radio, we caught something. A transmission on loop, an automated highway alert repeating, "Exit ahead. Proceed with caution." The voice was male, monotone, but every third loop grew distorted, deeper, until it sounded less like an alert and more like an imitation of speech. Ben squinted through the windshield. "There," he said, pointing. A green highway sign flickered into view, barely visible through the haze. "Exit 12, Route 191. The arrow bent sharply right, disappearing into the fog's belly. The problem was, it hadn't been there 5 seconds ago. We both knew this stretch by heart. We'd driven it dozens of times on runs between shifts. And yet, somehow, a full exit ramp had materialized out of nothing. I hesitated, my gut screaming no, but Ben was already turning the wheel. The Jeep veered right, tires crunching over what felt like gravel but looked more like wet glass. The fog swallowed us whole. The air changed temperature instantly, cold, sterile, and strangely dry, like stepping into a vacuum. I glanced at the speedometer. Dead zero. But the road still moved beneath us, slow, fluid, as though we were driving over something alive that mimicked motion. When the fog finally began to thin, we found ourselves on a narrow, 2-lane road lined with skeletal trees. No landmarks, no signs, only an old wooden billboard leaning against the dark. "Welcome to Route 191, home never left." I turned to Ben, my voice caught halfway between a question and a whisper. "Home never left? What the hell does that mean?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror, because in the reflection, through the murky glass and creeping fog, the exit sign was following us, dragging itself slowly down the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, the way light bends in water, reflections dancing without logic. But the sound that followed shattered any illusion. A low metallic scraping, like road signs being dragged across asphalt. The green exit sign, its post twisted and bent, was moving behind us, not sliding, not falling, but walking, each impact against the pavement echoing like a slow heartbeat. Ben slammed the gas pedal and the Jeep lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. The speedometer needle refused to rise past 40, though the engine roared as if tearing itself apart. The air outside rippled, thick and heavy, like driving underwater. We should have seen other cars by then, any sign of life. But the horizon stayed empty, identical on both sides. Black trees, pale mist, and the same billboard repeating every few miles. I could tell because the right corner was burnt, and the same moth circled its edge each time we passed. Ben's knuckles whitened around the wheel. "It's looping," he whispered. "It's looping, isn't it?" The words felt childish, yet true. Time wasn't flowing. It was circling the drain. Desperation makes you notice absurd details. The dashboard clock froze at 3:17 a.m., the exact minute we'd turned off the main highway. My phone displayed the same time. No service, no signal, no sound. Just 3:17 suspended. I remember studying the dark grooves in the road, how they seemed to shimmer faintly like veins under skin. I thought of geological fault lines, stress fractures deep beneath the crust, and wondered if Route 191 wasn't a road at all, but a scar. A wound in the earth trying to remember the trauma that made it. Ben suddenly swerved. "Someone's in the road," he shouted. Headlights carved through the fog, revealing a figure standing dead center, a man holding a road flare that hissed red smoke. I caught the glint of a highway maintenance badge on his jacket. He raised one hand, motioning for us to stop. Against every instinct we did. The flare cast the man in a trembling halo, face half lit, features melted by shadow. "You shouldn't be here," he said flatly, voice static torn. "There's no exit on Route 191. I opened my mouth to ask how we could leave, but before I could, the flare sputtered, and the man was gone. Just a pile of cooling ash on the asphalt. The red smoke coiled upward, spiraling into shapes that almost looked like letters. Exit 12. Ben reversed in panic, tires shrieking. The world outside seemed to unspool, the fog tearing open to reveal nothing. No sky, no stars, only a pale surface stretching forever downward. The highway began to tilt, groaning under invisible weight. My stomach dropped as the Jeep's nose angled into that impossible descent. And then, as if reality took one last breath, everything went still. I woke up at dawn on the main highway shoulder, engine cold, fog gone. Ben sat beside me, silent, staring at the GPS screen. It showed us parked directly under an active highway ramp, labeled Exit 12, Route 191, closed since 1974. Later, when I looked at the Jeep's dashcam footage, the recording stopped precisely at 3:17 a.m. The final frame showed our headlights illuminating a green sign half swallowed by fog. The words flickered faintly before the image froze. Welcome to Route 191, exit still ahead. Truckers learn to love static. It's the white noise of movement, the sound of time being sanded down into miles. That night the road was long and the air smelled of distant rain, a faint metallic tang that promised weather. My old CB radio sat crackling in the dash, mumbling to itself like an insomniac. Somewhere between Amarillo and nowhere, a new frequency bled through, clear, deliberate, professional. It was a news broadcast, but something was wrong. The anchor's voice was crisp, urgent, reading headlines I didn't recognize. I caught fragments. Interstate 40 closed after tanker explosion, and authorities still searching for missing truck driver involved in the early morning collision. I frowned. It was midnight. No such thing had happened. I switched channels, assuming I'd picked up a delayed signal from another state, maybe a recording. But when I glanced at my dashboard clock, it blinked 12:03 a.m., and the broadcast repeated, word for word, as if live. Except this time I caught the name. The missing truck driver's call sign, Red Line 27. Mine. I felt the bottom of my stomach drop. I tried laughing it off. Interference, coincidence, imagination stretched thin after 20 hours of caffeine and darkness. But the anchor's tone was too precise, the details too sharp. They even mentioned the road I was currently on, the mile marker I had just passed. Officials believe the driver may have lost control near mile marker 86, the voice said. Weather conditions remain poor. Outside, the rain began in small, decisive drops, tapping against the windshield like fingers counting down. I shut the radio off. The silence that followed felt thicker than air, like being underwater. The tires hummed softly, a mechanical heartbeat keeping me tethered to sanity. Then, without my touch, the radio clicked back on. The same voice, but now it wasn't the anchor. It was a police scanner feed reporting the same event, time-stamped 5:47 a.m. Accident confirmed, it said. 1 casualty pending identification. The timestamp stung. It wasn't 5 a.m. yet. It wasn't even close. I told myself I'd pull over, get some sleep, reset my brain. But curiosity is the oldest sin of drivers who travel alone. I leaned closer to the radio, listening for proof that it was all just scrambled code. Instead, the static softened, and a new sound took shape, a rhythmic hum, like a heartbeat masked under white noise. Then came another voice, softer, human, familiar, my own. Red Line 27 confirming southbound copy, it said. The tone was exact, the phrasing mine. The me on the radio spoke calmly about roads that hadn't appeared yet, weather patterns that hadn't formed, even songs I'd hum the next day. My chest tightened. The world outside blurred. For a moment, the sky and asphalt became one continuous gray vein, pulsing beneath the truck's motion. I glanced at the clock, 12:11 a.m. The next headline came through. Crisp and final. Driver of Red Line 27 found deceased at scene. Believed to have lost control near mile marker 86. I slammed on the brakes, tires screaming into the night. When the truck stopped, I looked out, and the sign standing just ahead read exactly what I dreaded, smearing the world into liquid glass. I sat there gripping the wheel, knuckles white, heart pulsing too loudly for the size of the cab. The radio hissed again, soft, coaxing, like a serpent whispering underwater. For a moment I considered smashing it, but curiosity is a leash we pretend we don't wear. Static turned to speech once more, the anchor's calm tone now cracked by distortion. Emergency crews have arrived. No survivors located. Identity pending confirmation. I looked out into the dark. The road ahead was empty, endless. Then lightning split the horizon, and for a fraction of a second, I saw the twisted skeleton of a truck lying in the ditch. Its metal ribs exposed, cabin crushed, wheels still faintly spinning. When the flash ended, the image remained in my mind like an afterburn. too vivid to dismiss. I unbuckled, stepped into the rain, and the night swallowed me whole. The air was heavy with ozone and engine oil. Every raindrop carried the taste of static. I approached the wreck, boots sinking into mud. The headlights, my headlights, still glowed weakly through the downpour, cutting short beams across the field. My own rig, identical in every detail down to the bumper sticker and the dent near the fender. The license plate was mine. The number printed on the door, Redline 27, was mine. Inside the wreck, through a spiderweb of cracked glass, I saw a figure slumped over the wheel. My first instinct was professional. Check the pulse, call dispatch. But my second instinct, the one whispering from the back of my skull, told me what I'd find. I opened the door anyway. Steam rolled out, warm and ghostly. The body's hand was clenched on the CB mic, knuckles frozen mid-grip. I touched the shoulder. Cold. Familiar. When I leaned closer, the face that stared back through rain-slick reflection was my own. The radio inside the crushed cab crackled to life again. My own voice, a recording of a future I hadn't yet reached, was calmly describing the scene, time-stamped 5:47 a.m. Weather conditions stable. 1 fatality confirmed. Redline 27 down. The speaker fizzed, then switched to the anchor's tone again. That detached professionalism of news meant for no one. This concludes the update for Tuesday, May 9th. Stay tuned for tomorrow's headlines. Tomorrow's headlines. I stumbled backward, falling onto the soaked grass. My truck, the one I'd arrived in, still idled on the shoulder, wipers beating like metronomes, keeping time for a song I no longer understood. Through the open door, my own radio had started up again. The same broadcast, the same story. Word for word, I ran to it desperate, yanked the plug, tore out the fuse, silenced it by force. The storm began to ease, clouds thinning to reveal a dim orange dawn. When I looked toward the ditch again, the wreck was gone. The field was empty. The only sound left was the faint hum of my radio speaker, still glowing though disconnected. It whispered one last line before dying out completely. Traffic cleared at mile marker 86. Driver continuing southbound. That morning, the world reported no accidents on Interstate 40. Yet when I tuned my radio the next night, I caught the same voice again, reading tomorrow's news, already knowing where I'd be. As if the air itself remembered what I refused to accept. I'd never really left that road. The first time I crossed that bridge, I remember thinking how unnaturally quiet it was. Bridges are supposed to sing. The groan of cables, the whisper of wind through beams, the muffled thump of tires against metal joints. But this one was silent, perfectly still, like sound itself refused to touch it. The sign read, Lone Hollow Bridge, 1932. No one had mentioned it in town, and the map showed no body of water underneath. Just a thin gray line cutting across a pale green patch of land. Yet the structure stretched for nearly half a mile, suspended over nothing. I'd been driving the back roads of West Virginia collecting acoustic readings for a research project on echo decay, how certain terrains absorb and reflect sound frequencies. My equipment was sensitive enough to capture the flutter of a bat wing 100 feet away. When I reached the midpoint of Lone Hollow Bridge, my instruments flatlined. Total silence. Even the truck's engine seemed muted, as if wrapped in thick wool. My body tensed instinctively. Silence at that depth isn't peace, it's pressure. Curiosity pushed me to stop. I stepped out, boots clanging softly against steel grating. The night smelled like iron and rain that hadn't fallen. Fog rolled under the bridge, or maybe above it. It was impossible to tell. The handrail was icy, slick with condensation. I aimed my flashlight downward, expecting to see a riverbed or maybe trees. Instead, the beam revealed emptiness. Not darkness, emptiness. The light simply vanished, swallowed by space that didn't reflect or return. My instrument still refused to read. Every decibel counter displayed 0.00 dB. Even my own heartbeat felt distant, delayed, like I was hearing it from the other end of a long hallway. I tried calling out just to break the tension. Hello? My voice didn't echo. It didn't even fade. It simply stopped. The air consumed it. That was when I noticed the markings on the railing, faint etchings of numbers and initials carved into the metal decades apart. But among the scratches was something fresh, Coordinates, written in grease pencil, still wet. My skin crawled when I realized they matched the location I'd submitted to my research supervisor earlier that day. No one else knew I was here. I started recording an audio log, half out of habit, half to prove I hadn't lost my mind. Testing ambient resonance, I said into the mic, but playback produced nothing. No static, no wind, no footsteps, just dead air. I rewound, tried again, even clapped my hands in front of the recorder. Nothing. Then, faintly, through the dead silence, a single sound emerged, a knock. 3 slow raps on the steel grating from somewhere beneath my feet. I froze, leaned over the railing. The fog shifted, and for a brief, impossible instant, I saw another bridge far below, identical to mine, same structure, same rust, same faint glow of my truck's headlights. And standing on that lower bridge was a figure, motionless, holding a flashlight aimed straight up at me. For a moment, we just stared at each other, me above, him below. The beam of his flashlight met mine in midair, 2 spears of light locked in perfect opposition, neither bending nor fading. The distance between us felt infinite yet intimate, like 2 mirrors facing each other across eternity. I wanted to call out, but my throat wouldn't obey. The silence pressed down harder, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting to see which one of us would speak first. Then the figure below raised his free hand and waved. The motion was slow, deliberate, my exact gesture from a few seconds earlier. My stomach turned cold. I lowered my flashlight slightly, and so did he. Every movement mirrored perfectly, with a delay too precise to be coincidence. It wasn't someone beneath the bridge. It was me. A panic as thin as wire began to tighten around my thoughts. I shouted, or thought I did, but the air devoured the sound before it left my lips. The figure below only stared upward, head tilted in the same confusion that now burned through me. My instruments in the truck began to beep faintly, detecting vibrations where none should exist. I looked at the readings. Frequency interference at 19 hertz, the threshold of infrasound, the pitch the human ear can't consciously hear, but the body can feel. That's the range associated with vertigo, nausea, and hallucinations. Science, I told myself. It's all science. A standing wave, a low-frequency feedback loop between parallel resonance structures. Bridges are designed to flex. Maybe this one flexed reality. But even as I rationalized, the figure below moved again, breaking the mirror pattern for the first time. I leaned closer to the railing and pointed downward, deeper into the fog. Another light flickered there. A third bridge, and on it, another pair of headlights. Another me, smaller, fainter, receding into infinite descent. The world began to spin slowly, like a coin refusing to fall flat. My head buzzed with static. I stumbled backward toward my truck, every step echoing somewhere else, but not here. The fog was pulsing now, breathing in rhythm with my heart. Through it, faint whispers drifted upward, multiple versions of my own voice speaking over one another, each recording the same log in slightly different tones. The bridge wasn't crossing a river. It was crossing me. I climbed into the truck, desperate to escape, and gunned the engine. The tires screeched but didn't move. The bridge stretched endlessly, each foot of progress folding back into itself. I checked the odometer, 0 miles traveled. The GPS glowed blank, then flickered on, displaying a single message. Continue straight. Something snapped. I turned the wheel hard, ramming the guardrail. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and I expected to plunge into water or ground. But instead, there was nothing. Just the soft sensation of falling through silence. My body felt weightless, suspended between breaths. When I opened my eyes, I was standing again on the bridge. Engine off. Headlights dim, only one sound remained, a steady tap from beneath the grating. 3 knocks, slow and patient, the same pattern I'd heard before. I leaned over the edge, heart quaking. This time there was no figure below, no light, only endless fog. But when I whispered, "Hello," a voice whispered back, perfectly timed, perfectly mine. They say Lone Hollow Bridge was demolished years ago. Yet sometimes truckers crossing that stretch report hearing knocks from beneath their rigs, 3 at a time, as if something far below still wants to make contact. It's just physics, interference, distance, weather. But the first time my instruments went dark inside Dead Zone 43, it felt like being erased. I'd been sent there by the telecom division to diagnose a mysterious black spot along a remote Arizona highway. For 10 miles, every signal, cellular, satellite, even radio, vanished completely. GPS maps flattened into gray grids, compasses spun without purpose, and sensors recorded pure silence across every measurable frequency.
They called it a technical anomaly. I called it curiosity bait. The desert was quiet in the way deserts get quiet, soundless yet humming, full of pressure instead of noise.
Heat shimmered off the asphalt like liquid glass. I parked near the boundary of the zone, where bars dropped from 4 to 0 in the blink of an eye. The edge of it was invisible, but stepping through felt like plunging underwater. The air thickened, and my earpiece gave a faint click. As if crossing into a different atmosphere, I powered up my spectrometer, expecting the usual background noise. Radio chatter, microwave bursts, the static song of the cosmos. Instead, the graph flattened completely, a perfect deadline. No peaks, no anomalies, no life. That in itself was impossible. Even deep space hums with residual radiation. But this was a silence engineered. A flock of crows passed overhead, then fell strangely mute mid-flight. Their wings still flapped, their shadows still danced, but no sound reached me. It was as though reality had been throttled, volume turned to 0. I whispered just to test my own sanity. My voice barely left my throat, swallowed instantly by air too heavy to carry it. The readings on my handheld began to flicker erratically. At first I thought it was equipment decay, desert heat frying circuits. But then the waveforms began to pulse rhythmically, up and down in a steady organic pattern. I recognized it almost immediately. It wasn't interference. It was a heartbeat. A human heart produces low-frequency vibrations around 1 to 2 hertz, normally imperceptible unless amplified. My sensors were capturing something identical but larger, deeper, more deliberate. I tracked the readings on foot, walking toward the center of the dead zone. Every few steps the pulse grew stronger. I could feel it in the soles of my boots. Thump, pause, thump, pause, like standing on the chest of something sleeping. The desert floor was cracked and bleached white, fractured like an old skull. My shadow wavered unnaturally, its edges bending in sync with each pulse. Then the tremor hit. Not an earthquake, not movement, but a pressure wave, subtle yet undeniable, traveling upward through the ground. My instruments spiked, the spectrogram exploding with color. I heard the faintest echo return, a low-frequency moan so deep it bypassed hearing altogether and settled in my bones. When I turned to retreat, I saw my truck, or thought I did, but it wasn't parked where I'd left it. It had moved closer, maybe 20 feet, though I hadn't heard the engine start, and its headlights were on now, glowing faintly through the heat haze. Only, the ignition key was still in my pocket. The air around me felt charged, ions dancing in visible patterns across my skin. I took one step backward, then another, but the truck didn't fade into distance. It pivoted, as if the entire landscape rotated subtly around it. The ground pulsed again, faint but deliberate, syncing perfectly with my heartbeat. My spectrometer continued to spike, printing data that looked more like cardiographs than signal traces. Each wave formed an unmistakable shape, the rhythmic surge of something alive. When the third pulse struck, my truck's radio clicked on by itself. White noise filled the air, but hidden inside it was something that didn't belong. A low, rhythmic thump matching the pulse beneath my feet. I tuned the dial slowly, expecting static. Instead, the noise stabilized into a sound that nearly buckled my knees. Breathing. Deep, drawn-out inhalations vibrating through the speakers, not mechanical but organic. Something beneath the earth was exhaling through my equipment. I switched off every device I had, and the radio, spectrometer, even my body cam. But the breathing continued. The truck's headlights brightened, then dimmed again, like pupils responding to light. When I placed my hand on the hood, I could feel it. Faint warmth, not from heat, but from circulation. The vehicle itself was responding to whatever lay beneath the desert floor. Science fought to keep control of my thoughts. I tried framing this in the language of physics. Subsonic resonance, perhaps? A natural cavity amplifying frequencies from magma flow or tectonic drift. But the rational explanations fell apart when the ground itself began to shift in tempo. The rhythm wasn't random anymore. It was adjusting to mine. I remembered a study once. Low-frequency exposure can cause the human heart to alter its rhythm subconsciously, syncing with external vibrations. It's called entrainment, but this wasn't entrainment. It was invitation. The pulse quickened slightly, urging my own to follow. I fought it, pressing a hand against my chest, trying to steady the beat. My vision swam. The world blurred into white, then back into color. For a heartbeat, or maybe many, I couldn't tell which pulse belonged to me. A sudden tone sliced through the static, a single high-frequency ping, like sonar. My truck's dashboard lit up, GPS flickering to life even though I'd disabled it. The screen showed one word where coordinates should have been: listen. Then, from beneath the soil, a deep groan answered, carrying through my boots and spine. The desert exhaled, slow and patient, as though the ground itself had lungs. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape, and crossed the invisible boundary of the zone. Instantly, the world rushed back. Sound, wind, the shriek of cicadas. My radio went silent, my sensors normal. The heartbeat was gone, everything ordinary again, except the earth behind me was still moving. I drove away without looking back, but the tremor followed faintly through the steering wheel. A subtle thump-thump, too consistent to be the road. I turned the radio dial one last time. Through faint static, a single sound emerged. The slow, heavy rhythm of my own heart, playing back from beneath the desert. Weeks later, the telecom logs showed no data from my instruments. Every recording was blank except for one, a low, continuous pulse labeled Dead Zone 43. Its frequency was identical to a human heartbeat. Mine. It began as something small, the kind of detail you'd only notice after too many late drives and too little sleep. I was on my usual commute home, same 40-minute stretch of county road I'd driven for years, when I saw the new detour sign. Bright orange, brand new, clean edges still shining under the high beams. It leaned slightly to the left, arrow pointing down a dirt path I'd never noticed before. The thing that caught me wasn't the sign itself, but how perfectly placed it was. Right where I'd been thinking about taking a shortcut for months. I slowed, blinked. No construction equipment, no cones, no flashing lights. Just that single sign and the wind shifting through the tall grass like it was breathing. I almost turned, but reason, the stubborn companion of habit, told me to keep going. I drove on, telling myself I'd imagined it. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the sign reflected in the taillight glow, swaying slightly, arrow tilting upward as if watching me leave. The next morning, the detour was gone. The shoulder where it had stood was empty, grass flattened in a perfect rectangle. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe a road crew had finished overnight or a prankster had stolen it. But the thought of that arrow lingered in my mind all day, like a memory that didn't belong to me. That night, driving home again, the sign was back. Same spot, same angle. This time I stopped. The surface of the reflective orange was flawless, still smelling faintly of fresh paint. I walked around it, checking for stakes, bolts, any sign of how it was anchored. Nothing. The metal post sank straight into the earth without disturbance, as though the road had grown it. The arrow pointed toward the same dirt path, only now there was a road. Narrow, compact, tire marks fresh, a voice in my head, not instinct, not fear, but something between curiosity and compulsion, whispered, "Just look." So I did. I drove maybe 100 feet in before my headlights caught something strange. Another detour sign, deeper in, pointing further into the woods. I reversed, heart thudding. The rational part of me was desperate to build explanations. Vandalism, hallucination, stress. Yet that night, I dreamed of orange arrows twisting through forest trails, endless and glowing, guiding me somewhere I'd already been. When I woke, the image clung like smoke. By evening, I decided to test it. I set up my dash cam, time-stamped and synced to my phone, determined to prove to myself that nothing uncanny was happening. But when I reached the curve where the sign had stood, it was already there, waiting, brighter than ever. This time the arrow pointed not toward the dirt road, but back the way I'd come. My chest tightened as I realized the sign wasn't showing a route. It was tracking one, and as I passed it, the arrow turned just slightly, following the motion of panic, half in disbelief. The rear-view mirror pulsed with orange light, a faint reflection bouncing through the fog behind me. I refused to look back. My rational brain clawed for ground. Optical illusion, heat shimmer, reflective paint bending through light distortion. Anything but what it felt like. Pursuit. The night around me had thickened into a tunnel of motion. Even the trees seemed to lean inward, watching. I drove until the road straightened, until the hum of tires steadied my heartbeat. And then, out of sheer defiance, I looked in the mirror. The sign was there. Not behind me, not stationary. Moving, gliding along the asphalt like it was on rails. No pole, no base, just the flat metal face, arrow glowing faintly under the moonlight. It kept pace with the car effortlessly, always the same distance away. My dashcam blinked red, still recording. That gave me courage, where proof would make it real, and reality, no matter how cruel, was safer than insanity. I pressed record manually, narrating what I saw, describing every impossible detail. My voice shook, but the facts steadied me. When I reached the intersection at Miller's Creek, a familiar split I'd taken hundreds of times, I slammed the brakes. Dust and dead leaves swirled around the car. The sign stopped too, hovering at the edge of my headlights like it was waiting for instruction. The arrow pointed right, toward the long-forgotten service road that led deeper into the hills. That road had been closed for years, ever since the landslide. I killed the engine. Silence folded over me like a heavy blanket. Then the arrow began to blink. Once, twice, thrice. A slow rhythm, like a heartbeat, or a countdown. Against all better judgment, I stepped out. My shoes crunched gravel. The night smelled of ozone and rust. The sign's glow painted the world in copper tones. Up close, I noticed something I hadn't before. Faint text beneath the reflective surface, invisible unless lit at the right angle. Words printed over words, hundreds of overlapping warnings. Turn back, keep left, keep right, dead end. It was every instruction ever written for roads that no longer existed. I lifted my phone to film it, but the screen glitched into static. Through the distortion, for one impossible frame, I saw my own reflection, standing miles away down that old service road, bathed in orange light. The camera froze on my face before dying completely. The sign flickered again, arrow tilting left, now pointing toward my car. My breath hitched. The air around it shimmered like heat haze, and then it spoke. Not with sound, but through vibration. A hum in my bones, forming words only I could feel. You're already off route. The sign tilted backward, sinking slowly into the asphalt until only the tip of the arrow remained. Then it was gone. The road went dark. I scrambled back into the car and drove home on instinct, headlights carving through disbelief. The next morning, I checked my dashcam footage. The timestamp was wrong. 3 hours ahead. The road was empty. No sign, no detour. Just me, narrating to nothing, following directions from a road that never existed. Yet sometimes when I drive at night, the dashboard GPS still flashes a single message before recalculating. Rerouting. Rerouting. Every map ends somewhere, though most of us never think about it. We drive past the edges of ink and digital data, trusting the cartographers and satellites to keep the world stitched together. But some nights, when the air hums just wrong, you can feel the seams of reality. The quiet places where the road stops pretending to go anywhere. I found one, or maybe it found me. It began with the research, the obsession really. After years of chasing the anomalies, I started noticing patterns. The looping highways, the phantom exits, the mile markers that refused to obey arithmetic. Every single case intersected at one coordinate, a blank region on the Department of Transportation map labeled only as no data. A place that didn't exist, yet kept appearing in the metadata like a ghost signature, a null point, a road that wasn't supposed to be drawn. I left at sunset, following what little the GPS could still render, a gray artery branching into wilderness. For the first 50 miles, everything was normal. Asphalt humming, insects dancing in the beams, radio murmuring softly through static. But then the signal began to distort, not fade, distort. Voices overlapping, layered frequencies like multiple stations bleeding through each other. One whispered, "Keep driving." Another said, "You've already arrived." By the time the fuel gauge dipped below half, the world had simplified. No signs, no trees, no reflections in the mirrors. The lines on the pavement shimmered faintly, pulsing like veins under skin. I passed a sign that read "End of Maintenance," though the road ahead looked freshly paved. The asphalt gleamed unnaturally smooth, untouched by time or weather. I kept going. The horizon folded inward, stars dimming one by one until the sky was matte black, like driving through a sealed dome. My instruments failed in unison, GPS, altimeter, even the analog compass spinning lazily. I stopped, rolled down the window and listened. There was no wind, no echo, no distant hum of civilization. Only a low, continuous vibration rising from beneath the car, subtle yet alive. Curiosity had carried me through a dozen impossible highways, but this was different. This felt final. I stepped out, boots crunching against pavement that didn't sound right. Softer, hollow, as if covering something vast and resonant below. When I walked around to the rear of the car, the road behind had vanished. Not faded into darkness, gone. Just a void, blacker than night, absorbing the beam of my flashlight without reflection. Ahead, the asphalt ended in a sharp, perfect line, as if someone had sliced the world clean in half. Beyond it stretched nothing. Not fog, not space, just absence. I took one cautious step forward, toes at the edge. My reflection stared back from that empty expanse, not mirrored but delayed, repeating movements a heartbeat too late. It smiled before I did. I wanted to run, but the voice from the radio returned, calm, familiar, identical to mine. "You've reached the end of your route." The voice lingered in the static, gentle but absolute, the kind of tone GPS systems use to announce your destination. Except this time it sounded less like direction and more like judgment. "You've reached the end of your route." The air around me was unnaturally warm, humming faintly, as if the void ahead radiated a pulse I couldn't see. I should have turned back, but the road behind me had dissolved, replaced by a sheet of moving darkness that felt less like shadow and more like thought. I took another step toward the edge. My reflection moved again, perfectly synchronized this time. The delay was gone. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was presence. Every rational instinct rebelled, trying to translate this into physics, to anchor the moment in reason. Mirror neurons, optical depth illusions, magnetic field interference, none of it fit. The figure across the divide tilted its head, the same subtle angle I used when reading impossible data, a mimicry too precise to be coincidence. Then it spoke, my voice without lungs. "You've been here before." My pulse quickened. "No," I said aloud, though the sound came out wrong, hollow, as though filtered through distance. The figure smiled faintly and stepped closer, or maybe I did. The space between us seemed to inhale, collapsing like paper. I looked down. The edge of the asphalt was crumbling grain by grain, small pebbles dissolving into the void below without a sound. I crouched, dropped a coin into it. Nothing. No fall, no echo, just disappearance. It hit me then. This wasn't a place at all. It was a process, a terminus built into the geometry of movement itself, the inevitable conclusion of every direction ever taken. Every haunted road, every looping mile, every misplaced marker had been leading here. A single point where motion and memory converge. The cartographer's version of death. The radio inside my car flared back to life, blaring white noise that resolved into a familiar rhythm, a heartbeat, steady and deep. My heartbeat. The dashboard flickered, screens bleeding data faster than I could read. Each coordinate flashing by wasn't a location, but a timestamp. Every journey I'd ever made. Each number ended in the same code, 00 end. The figure stepped closer, reaching out a hand, palm open, patient. "Finish the route," it said. Its voice was both invitation and inevitability. I reached back, half from fear, half from wonder. When our fingers touched, the sensation was electric, like grabbing hold of the world's pulse. Every sound I'd ever heard flooded back at once. Engines, rain, static, human breath, all folding into a single, endless note. The next thing I remember is standing by my truck at dawn, parked in the middle of an empty field. No road, no asphalt, just dry earth stretching endlessly in all directions. My map was blank, the GPS frozen on no data. I should have felt lost. Instead, I felt still, like the world had finally exhaled. I realized the truth wasn't that the road had ended. It was that the journey had never been about distance at all. Every route, every anomaly, every haunted mile had been the same silent question. When does motion become meaning? And somewhere past the edge of every map, the answer was waiting, still eternal, listening. Subscribe, if you dare.